Genre, biography. Fantasy becomes fact. Inventing the future. Have you ever imagined ways of traveling into space? Or have you used a tool and wished it did something more? One person who thought just this way was the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur is most famous for writing novels and stories about science and the future. But you may not know that real inventions came about as a result of things he first imagined. In his writings, Arthur envisioned technologies that did not yet exist, but might. This was no accident. Arthur studied and used scientific knowledge all during his lifetime. Arthur wrote about advanced computers and spaceships. Years later, these technologies were developed. Science at an early age. Even as a child, Arthur was passionate about science. Born in England in 1917 in a small town by the sea, Arthur spent his school years enthusiastically reading his favorite science fiction magazine. He was fascinated by astronomy and built a telescope when he was just 13. He also started writing his own science fiction stories. He even published them in a school magazine. Arthur loved imagining the future. Arthur's own future became uncertain as a teenager, when his father died. Since his mother could not afford to send him to college, Arthur moved to London at the age of 19 and got an office job. In his free time, he worked at the subjects he loved. He also continued to write science fiction. His love of science and its possibilities would soon be useful. Arthur C. Clarke's interest in science and space exploration lasted all his life. He sometimes constructed his own tools for his research. Predicting the future. In 1939, Arthur joined the Royal Air Force to help fight the Second World War. It was there that Arthur began to invent. Arthur became an expert in the radar systems used to guide planes and detect enemies. This technology gave Arthur ideas. He imagined an amazing breakthrough in communication systems. He proposed a wireless system using space stations. This system required rockets to carry satellites into space. Then the satellites would help transmit signals around the Earth. Since satellites and space stations did not exist, this idea was a demonstration of Arthur's imagination. He had learned much about space. As with any inventor, Arthur built on technologies that already existed to create his system. For example, rockets had been invented but could not yet travel into space. In 1957, Russia used a rocket to launch Sputnik 1, which became the first man-made object to orbit Earth. In the 1960s, a satellite communication system was created. It was just like the one Arthur had envisioned years before. Years later, the same kind of satellite was used to make cell phone communication possible. Although Arthur claimed the communication system as his own idea, he did not apply for patents. As a result, he never made money from his idea. Satellites like this one began with the launch of Sputnik 1, which weighed less than 200 pounds and was only about 23 inches in diameter. Can science fiction come true? In 1968, Arthur published one of his best-known novels, 2001: A Space Odyssey. In the novel, Arthur imagined a computer that controlled almost everything. Arthur's computer idea, HAL, could actually think for itself. Today, computers cannot think for themselves. However, they do control many of the devices in our homes, cars, planes, and spacecraft. HAL could recognize human voices as well as speak back. This technology did not exist when the book was written, but it is common today. Arthur's novel also predicted advances such as space stations and rocket-powered missions to far-off planets. He even predicted people reading news on electronic screens. Arthur C. Clarke's science fiction books have captivated readers around the world. Many of the technologies he wrote about seemed like fantasy at the time, but they turned into fact. His creative ideas may have inspired others to invent the very technologies he imagined. Inventors start out by imagining what the future will look like.